Lecture 2, Naming Conventions That Save Your Life. So we've talked about kind of file structures, where you would save a file. Today we're going to get more specific and actually talk about how we should be saving our files. So it's not only important that we have them saved, but we also need to have some sort of organization system to be able to track them down, be able to find them. So specifically, we're going to be looking at creating coherent file naming and folder organization systems. And so why do names matter? Right? They need to tell you something. So you're not just putting random letters in there. It needs to actually be a form of organization for you, right? And so there's, you can obviously say this is assignment 1 for whatever class. If you just leave it like that, or if you say paper econ, what does that mean? If you're an econ major, particularly, you're going to have tons and tons of papers in econ. So you need the name of the file to actually tell you what the file is, and then also give you information about the versions. So I mentioned version history before. We don't generally sit down and just do an entire assignment in one go. Maybe some of you do, and that's amazing. Good for you. But that's not how it works for most people. There's usually a constant kind of process of revision. And so there might be big changes that you make sometime. You might delete a big block of text, but you don't want to lose that completely. So if you save one version, the past version, then you can save the new version as well. And so you need to have your file name system telling you that. And so it does sound really obvious, right? Like hopefully a lot of you already do that, at least to some extent. So I'm not telling you this like it's something you don't know, but just to really reinforce the importance of it. And so I'm going to show you a couple different options or styles for what we would say are good naming patterns, kind of thinking about best practice. And so it's important that you can kind of ground things in something that will be consistent. And so here you're looking at the date and the title. And so you give a specific day that you're working on the project and then the research draft. Hopefully this would be in a file structure that would also kind of give it some context. So it would be within a certain class folder or something like that. But so here you can very clearly look at it and say, okay, that's the draft that I was working on last Tuesday. It was the first version. And so you would keep working on it. You'd have a version 2, you'd update the date. So you'd remember, sometimes you might work in a coffee shop one day, in the library in another, and you might remember something that you thought of when you were in the library. And so if you can kind of place it yeah, I know I was there on that day, this naming style will help you be able to track that down more easily. So here, using the actual course name. So English 201, that makes it really easy to know, okay, that was in that class. It was, sophomore year, I wrote that paper. Gives you a little bit more context. This can also be useful if maybe you're not always great at saving things in their home file. But so if you found this file on your desktop, you would still be able to kind of place it back into that course. You'd still be able to find it maybe a little bit easier than you would one that's more reliant on the date. So you're working on multiple things on the same day, but here this is for my English class. You can also see here just how versions would work over time. And so you have, whatever your name is, but then tack on to the end, version 1, version 2. This is my final. This is maybe my final now, my actual final, once you really, really commit to something. And so if you have, sometimes in classes, you'll have to submit a rough draft before the final. Definitely helps for that. You want to keep the rough draft there so you know what you submitted then and kind of connect that to the feedback that you get from your professor. And so you want to be looking at that while you're still working on the final, making the changes. And if you just kind of start over from the rough draft, you're not going to have that history or the comments maybe that your professor gave you, where saving all of these different versions will give you a little bit more of that ability to kind of reflect and look back and actually see how you're making changes and how they're hopefully responding to the feedback that you gave, or to be able to say, actually, no, that isn't responding to what that was. And so then I can go back and make that change. And so maybe that's how you end up with multiple final versions when you see kind of the nitty gritty details. But this just kind of helps you track it more completely. And I'll be honest, when I was an undergrad, I would save multiple versions of things. And 10 years after I graduated, I still keep a lot of those assignments, but I have gone back through my folders back from then and deleted earlier versions. So I just have the final version of documents now. So it's not to say that you need to commit this space on your hard drive to keeping these files forever, but just while it's still relevant, while you might need to actually have a callback to it at some point in the, not too distant future. These might look more familiar to you. Um, I know from my end, if I look at assignments I'm grading, these are much more of the kind of file names that I see from my students. Particularly this last one here, document 14. I will have whole classes where, all but two students will submit something that's document and then a number. And so the person looking at your file sees this as well, right? And so these earlier versions, they present kind of an idea of order, somebody who's committed, organized, um, taking this seriously, right? Kind of coming at it from a professional perspective. Whereas new or paper thing, real, those aren't really giving that same sort of idea, or they're not kind of selling you in the same way that something a little bit more organized does. And so it shouldn't be that file names reflect back on you in any way, but the reality is it does. People will think about that. I had a paper I was grading just the other day that was, the file was just called beep. And I was like, what does beep mean? Like, I'm trying to understand the meaning of it. It had nothing to do with the assignment at all. So, even with that, you're distracting the person who's opening the file. And you don't want to do that. You don't want there to be these extra silly things that actually don't have any value to impact the reception of whatever you're sending. So, a lot of instances in school, maybe people aren't going to see the file names, but once you're working and you're emailing files to colleagues or you're presenting them, people are going to see those names and it's going to reflect back on you. And so if you just get into the habit of intentionally naming things using some sort of style, it's just going to be better all around. And it really does become second nature once you start doing it. It's just going to be your default. So it's good to kind of get into the practice of that. And so this is going to help you, especially if we think about like backing up your files. If you know how to find the files to send them to wherever you're sending them for backing up, you're going to be able to be a lot more proficient. You're going to be correct more often than you're incorrect when you're choosing files. It's going to give you a way to track your drafts and see how you evolve over time, see how your writing gets better or whatever project it is, see how it improves. You're going to be able to come into your hard drive and find things a lot faster. You're not going to have to click around and open stuff and close it, wait for all of that. Um, you know, as computers get older, it takes longer for files to open. In my computer, it takes a long time for a PDF to open now. And so if I save the PDFs properly and I can open the right one, I'm not wasting all of that time. It also helps when you're collaborating. So if you send a file to somebody like a partner when you're working on a project and it says final, what does that mean to them? Where if it says, it's this project, it's this version that we're working on that date, it's going to mean something to your partner and they're going to be able to make sure they're opening the right file as well. And so that's another thing too. If you're like swapping something back and forth between people, you need to have some sort of clarity. So having a name that actually tells you what it is going to help a lot with that. And then there's a professionalism piece. I've already talked about that a lot, but it's something that maybe doesn't seem important, but actually really is. So just kind of be aware of the presentation you're making to other people with your file names. So key takeaway, the names matter. They really do. And within that, I gave you some options. You can make up other ideas, other things that make sense for you. There's no right way to do it. It just should be in some kind of consistent manner. It kind of follows conventions. So like capital letters, things like that would be good. Just something that kind of like fits into expectations of good practice. And so if you kind of just think about like what seems professional, those are generally going to be the sorts of things, but just, don't put any kind of value into your name. So you're like, I've had files submitted before that says this is a crappy paper, or I hate this, or this is a stupid assignment. Not the best way to name something, right? And you're not really, hopefully, maybe that would be the only paper that you hate. But odds are, if you feel that way about one paper, you're going to feel that way about multiple papers. And so you're not going to be able to tell the difference. And then the person that you're sending it to is going to be getting a certain perception. So just think about all of those sorts of things. And then once you get into the practice, and like here, you're going to be doing some work to create new file systems and organization systems, and you're going to see how much a difference having quality naming that connects back to something, means something, is going to help when you're just organizing your files in general. So those are the key takeaways for lecture number 2.